this legislation. I do think, I mean, it'd be great to see the debate in the Senate around could we have a more aggressive target, and I don't know what the Labor Party would say to that, or could we remove some of the restrictions around the 25% target in exchange for passing it? Or, you know, we could improve the bill in innumerable ways. But we do need to start somewhere. How long have we been talking about this issue? How long have we been trying to do something in this country?
Do you think that with the targets being in the legislation, what sort of risks do you think that poses?
There is it's all about probabilistic assessments, yeah? And there is a significant risk at that level of reductions that we'll still see dangerous climate change. And besides, the other thing to understand about the CPRS is that it's not the only tool in the toolbox. It's not the only thing we've got. We've got MRETs, we've got regulation, we've got a whole lot of other things that can all work together to produce a good outcome. We need to use all of the tools. One of them is the CPRS, and it's just my personal assessment. We need to actually start on the road. We need to get out with that and start moving.
And Nick, what's your assessment?
I made it clear that I can't support the CPRS in its current form. I think I said, you probably upset the government saying that, you know, when they announced some changes to it and tinkering with the targets, I said, a lame duck with a haircut is still a lame duck. But look, I understand completely where Tim's coming from. His concern that if we don't do anything, I guess the concern I have, Tim, is that the problem with the design, the architecture of the scheme in its current form, is that once we lock ourselves into that, we won't be able to go further. And I see the scheme as being too inflexible. You may have seen reports, I think it was in the paper today. I'm putting my hand in my pocket to fund some modelling along with the coalition. There are some elements of the coalition that I think want to go further. Not many of them, but there's some out there who actually want to go further than Labor in terms of targets. And my view is that if we can get an alternative economic model where you don't have the same economic impact, the same sort of initial price effects, logically that means you can go for a higher target. And that's what my main game is. And what I'm concerned about with the CPRS in its current form is that it is so Byzantine in its complexity, there's a huge degree of revenue churn, huge price effects, that it just becomes a bureaucratic nightmare. It's kind of like a GST on steroids. And that's why I think we need to look at improving it, go for higher targets, but have pathways where we can actually go for the higher targets that Tim is talking about, so that in 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 years' time, we've got an opportunity to actually move forward. And you're right, the MRET scheme, the renewable energy targets, regulations, we need to do all those things. I don't think we're doing anywhere near enough to get to that, but that's what my main game is, and that's why I keep talking to both the coalition and the government, because the only way we're going to get this through, whether you like it or not, short of a double dissolution election, is to have bipartisan support. And it's a question of just pushing both political parties to go further, because given Senator Fielding's position, I can't see him coming on board.
I was wondering what you think then about how, if we need to demonstrate to politicians how much we care about climate change and how much we want certain solutions, what is the effect of social movements at the moment, and how can they be more effective?
Well, just very quickly on that, I think we've got an election next year, haven't we? So here's a great opportunity. I'd like to see all people standing for various seats around Australia publicly state their position on climate change. Why not?
Nick, what's your perspective? How can social movements be effective in creating change?
Well, I think when it comes to election day, all of us are equal. And I think you need to target the marginal seats, but I think before we get to that stage, you need to push the two major parties so we can have a bidding war to go for higher targets and to have a more effective scheme. And I think, you know, as Tim and Rob said, that there are a whole range of other things we can do. For instance, one of the things that came out in the 2 Senate inquiries I sat on, was that agriculture can do a lot more. Agriculture is not supposed to be in the scheme until 2014, and it's very much an all sticks and no carrot approach. But if farmers change their tillage practices, that could make a huge contribution. If we encouraged biochar and biosequestration, or biochar in particular, that could make a very big difference as well. So I think that we could do a lot more. And at the moment, the government's had a very fixed view, a very blinkered view of what needs to be done. But politically, I think that if you push both major parties to realise they have to both go a lot further, my dream is to have a bidding war between the two major parties as to who can go higher in terms of emissions. At the moment, it's sort of like a Mexican standoff, and I think don't underestimate your power in shifting a number of seats at the next election.
If, from the audience, that is, if 2 degrees will have disastrous impacts as you've described, and it may be irreversible and trigger irreversible feedback mechanisms, why should that be our goal, and should we have a much more stronger goal internationally?
Well, sure, look, 2 degrees is another step on a journey. What we're saying there is that there is a threshold beyond which humanity loses control to influence the system. And so that has to be the step, but ultimately the goal that I have is to live sustainably on Earth. And I think that our human species actually does have a destiny or a role in the planet, and that role is to act as a sort of an intelligent regulation system for the planet. Humanity, as we start moving towards things like the Copenhagen Protocol, are starting to exert their intelligence on the system. Eventually the day will come when the whole Earth will be sustainable by virtue of our intelligent decisions that we make, I think. And that's the end, not the end, that is the sort of goal, I suppose, for me ultimately. 2 degrees is just the first step on a very, very long journey to get there.
So in terms of what we need as a global climate, there's scientists like James Hansen have suggested that 350 parts per million of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere should be the upper limit. Would you be advocating something like 350?
I think I would. 350. We're already at 389, so we need to draw it down. But can I just give you one piece of news that should give you great hope? That is actually achievable, because plants every year draw 8% of all atmospheric carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. 8%. Yeah? After 12 years, there'd be no CO2 in the atmosphere if it wasn't coming in from other sources, right? So we have the perfect carbon capture tool with us already. It's called plants. We need to look after our forests. We need to turn some of that plant matter into permanently sequestered carbon in the form of charcoal, soil carbon and everything else. So 350 is eminently achievable. We just need to think of the climate problem not as an industrial problem, but as a global carbon imbalance problem, and use the tools that Gaia gave us to solve it.
I have one question for each panellist just to wrap up, and that's, what's the power of young people moving forward?
The reality is you are extremely powerful, and what I'd like to leave with you is that I think you should use it, and you should use that power, and you should also try and influence your friends, universities, high schools, when you get to 18, because in the voting system, politicians look very much towards the younger generations.
I know that however long I'm in the Senate, whether it's this year or next year, there's double dissolution, I get chucked out, or I'm there for 6 years, or however many years I'm there, I know that there'll be no bigger decision that I will have to make than on climate change. I know that. I get it. And we're getting to a tipping point. It's an environmental tipping point, and there's a political tipping point. And that's why this gathering, this meeting, is so important, so that when you walk out of here, you organise 10 friends and they organise 10 others and scare the crap out of politicians in the major parties to know that this is going to be the big issue. This is the big issue, because once we reach the point of no return, that's it, we're stuck. So that's what I'd urge you to do, just take the energy out of this place and actually make a difference in the next election.
It's a tough job in some ways, because you have to make our generation uncomfortable, you know, us and older people, and you're challenging some very fundamental beliefs, their belief systems, their sense of their worth in the world. You're challenging the sense of what their life has all been about in a lot of ways, because this is a fundamental moral shift that we're looking at after everything else. It's going to take a lot of guts, a lot of bravery and a lot of commitment and a lot of organisation. And I have a little saying about the world, which I think I could share with you. Never get angry, just get even. Don't allow yourself the luxury of getting angry. Don't allow yourself the luxury of getting pessimistic or optimistic. Just get even. Just make sure you win at the end of the day. Good luck to all of you.